Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we have my full review and discussion of the Liong Mah NUK. Now I've got to tell you, there is a brand called NUK, N-U-K, that makes pacifiers. This is not a pacifier, well at least not in that sense. I suppose it could be a pacifier in the right situation, but it's certainly not something you want to give to your baby. So this knife is actually a Liong Mah design, and it was designed by him for Battlebox, and it was included in, I think, the August Battlebox, but it could have been the July. Someone can mention down in the comments which one that actually was. Anyway, shortly after that Battlebox released, Liong Mah had these available on his website for like $100, and that's not a terrible price. We'll talk about price a little later on, but that is one of my issues with this particular knife. The design itself is pretty cool, and I've got to say the tolerances and the quality of the machining and that kind of thing, the fit and finish, is actually pretty impressive on this guy. The blade shape is definitely very interesting. Kind of reminds me of the Tempest, although it's significantly different. We'll talk about the blade as well coming up here shortly. But overall, you know, for now, I just want to kind of give you that impression of the design. And you can sort of see, especially with that pivot, the decorative pivot with the moon glow in behind it. By the way, this has full moon glow throughout the knife. That is to tie in with that nuke theme, and I think the theme for that battle box was sort of like surviving a nuclear strike or something like that. And so that's kind of how that's kind of the background to this knife. I was able to pick one up, as I say, for the cheap price when they did a special promotion. And they have since gone up in price by a significant amount to like $150, which I do think is completely unreasonable for this knife. So if you're really interested in this, just wait. I think Battlebox is pretty quickly going to figure out that no one's going to pay that, and they'll have to bring the price down. So just wait for that to happen. Let's go ahead and get into the size and weight on this guy. So here we have an overall size of 8 5/16. So that's a little more than 8 1/4 inches. Okay, so pretty good size for an EDC knife. The blade is 3 9/16 inches, and you do have that choil kind of taken out of there. All right, so you got a little less cutting edge, and I'll grab a tape measure and show you, or grab a ruler and show you that cutting edge when we get to the blade discussion. Excuse me. The handle on this guy is 4 3/4 inches. All right, so that's what you've got for handle length, 4 3/4 inches. And this is a pretty hefty 6.23 ounces. So 6.23 ounces is definitely a little more than I want to be carrying for a knife of this size. You know, at 6.23 ounces, I could carry something like a 0560 or something big like that. And so for this fairly small knife, and I mean, it's not little, it's still over 8 inches, but for a knife that's 8 1/4 inches, you know, you're probably, I consider, 4 1/2 ounces to be pretty well where you should be able to land with that. And so for this to come in at 6 ounces is a little overbearing. And that's going to put some people off. Now, I have carried this knife, and honestly, it's not that bad to carry. In fact, it's actually a fairly comfortable knife in pocket. The pocket clip itself, now we're talking about carry. Let me close the knife. It's not a huge footprint, so this is not a massive knife, and so because of that, it's not that bad in your pocket, okay? So it's pretty comfortable to carry other than that weight. And the weight does become a problem if, let's say, you're wearing, a lightweight pair of shorts or slacks. Then yeah, you're definitely going to notice this. But if you're wearing jeans or 511 or cargo pants or something like that, the weight is not going to be a big issue for you. Let's go ahead and talk about this blade. The blade is one of the features I really do appreciate on this knife. So it's D2 steel, which at the price point I think is less than what it ought to be. Okay, for $150, this needs to be like S30V or S35VN or something along those lines. But D2, that's not bad for a budget-friendly stainless steel frame lock. Just this one isn't that budget-friendly. So let's talk about the blade design itself, because for me, remember, this was not that expensive. But hollow grind on this portion, which makes it really nice and slicey back here. It works really well. I've used this for cutting lots of different things that require a thin slicey blade, cheese, tomatoes, that kind of stuff. I always cut those kind of things with every knife just to see how they perform. And this one did pretty well. The cool thing is they've got a flat grind out here, which makes it a little stronger, but it actually still cuts pretty nicely, and I went out of my way to kind of do that transition and test both parts of the blade. And even this part of the blade, which is flat ground and a little thicker, does work just fine. And I do like that. In terms of the blade shape, we've sort of got a modified Tanto clip point style blade here. Nice swedge on top, very, very distinctive clip, and this sort of Tanto-ish grind. And I do think it's a pretty nice looking grind. It's doing something a little bit different, but it's still very functional. And I've got to say, whatever else you think about this, a knife that's able to have a grind that looks as interesting as this one does, but still performs really well, that's let's give some credit where credit is due. The coating on here looks kind of like just a black spray-on coating or bake-on coating. However, I did contact Liong Mah, and he did point out to me that, or he did tell me that this is DLC coating. It doesn't look, let me get it in here close for you. It doesn't look like most of the DLC coatings that I have seen, but that being said, it's not the worst one ever. And of course, DLC coating, it has held up really well. Now I want to bring this knife in. This is an example. This is the Riyadh Epoch, of course. This is a DLC coating, and this is how I like to see DLC coating done. Okay, this is really, really nice. Do I have, let's see. Oh yeah, here we go. Here's one more example, and this is maybe a little closer to what we're getting on this this NUK. This is the DLC coating on the Cold Steel Recon 1. All right, so it's maybe a little more similar. And so if you've got a Recon 1 or some of the other newer Cold Steels since they've switched to the DLC, that should give you a bit of an idea of what this finish is going to be like. It's a little more eggshell, it's a little more toned down, not as reflective as any of the knives I showed you, but I just wanted to give you sort of a bit of a comparison on that coating so you had an idea about it. So blade, by the way, there is a benefit to that coating, and that is, you're going to get the good performance out of D2 steel. And by the way, this has held an edge well. I think it's well done D2 steel, and by adding the DLC coating, you do take away the one weak point of D2, which is it can rust. So now you've got the performance of D2 with a nice coating that's not going to allow it to corrode for you. So that's a pretty, overall, that's a pretty good way of doing this blade. Of course, you guys know I prefer satin finish blades over coated blades, but not the end of the world at all. And somehow, you can kind of see as you look at this, they've still allowed you to see the different variances in the grind. And so I do appreciate that. What I don't like about DLC is when it sort of hides the detail of the blade that's going on, especially on a knife like this where it's pretty cool detail. Lockup and deployment. Well, pretty standard here, nothing, super fancy going on. This is a stainless steel liner lock. It's on bearings. The pivot is adjustable with the Torx bit there. Detent is pretty nice. Okay, deploys nice and quick for you when you break that detent. Now it's definitely a light switch, not a push button. So if you try to push button this, one, you're pushing on the very sharp point of that flipper, and so it's not very comfortable. And number two, you still have to sort of transition the force to more of a light switch force anyway. So really, this is a knife that likes to be light switched more than anything else. It is on bearings, and it does deploy nice and quick. Now, the lock bar tension is fairly high, not uncomfortably so, but because of that, you can sort of feel, you can sort of see how it doesn't just drop super, super free. All right, so that's something to kind of notice and be aware of. I'm just wanting to take a look here in the back, see if you can see it in there. There is, I'm trying to show you, there is a detent ramp on this knife. So there's where I should be striking the detent ball, and it just kind of rolls up over it. And that is very, very much appreciated. So lockup and deployment is a total win. I'm absolutely very impressed with this. And I will say it's nice to see that detent ramp on a knife of this price point because that's not something you're normally going to get. And so that is a little bit of a value added feature. Handle, Handle is stainless steel, of course, as we've said, and the construction is kind of cool. Now, if you look in here, you can see that it's all been milled out, and there are these nested or inlaid portions of moon glow, and that's pretty neat. The only issue that I have with this is, and it looks really cool when this part glows, the problem is it doesn't often glow because if you're like, 99% of people who carry a pocket knife, they carry it in their pocket, which means, the only portion of the knife that's sticking out is right here. And it's been this interesting phenomenon. Yesterday, two of the lights blew in our kitchen light, and I haven't got around to replacing them yet because I realized, hey, we didn't have any more light bulbs, so I've got to go get some. Anyway, because of that, the kitchen's been a little dark, and when I carried this knife, I put it down on the counter, and the back part glowed because it's been exposed to the light all day while the knife's been in my pocket, but the front part didn't do much because, of course, it's been in the darkness of my pocket as I've been carrying the knife around. So just kind of an interesting, rather humorous note there. I will say this, guys, the construction and the aesthetic design on this handle is very attractive. The fit and finish is really nice as well. The decorative pivot here is nice and flush. The screws have been flushed off. See that, how they're nice and flat. Little insert here where you can switch the clip. All right, and I don't normally pay too much attention to that. That's my, I guess my right-handed privilege is showing. I don't really pay too much attention to those reversible clips, and I don't usually take points away. But I know if you're a lefty, you're gonna really, really care that this is a reversible clip. Having said that, a lot of lefties have pointed out, and I think legitimately so, that the lock being where it is what really makes the difference for right or left-handed users. And so without actually, creating a mirror image of this handle, you're not really fully embracing those lefties out there. But it is possible to at least change the clip around so you could carry this on your left side pocket. It is only tip-up carry. And of course, that's not a problem as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I kind of like it. In terms of ergonomics, this knife does do a very good job, okay? It really, that front choil and with that extra little sort of secondary choil here that allows your 3 fingers here, it does fit my hand exceptionally well. And there's enough wiggle room that I think a person could have considerably larger hands than me and still be okay. All right, plus it does something that I'm always a fan of, and that is gives me a nice choil up here. And I've got to say, that is something I'm really a fan of. Especially I find if I'm using sort of this front portion of the blade, which because of that belly I think is more useful than a typical Tanto. You can kind of choke up here and get some really fine work done. So I've got to say, the ergos on this are a real win. One complaint I do have about the pocket clip, it's stainless steel, 3D machine stainless steel. It's a little tight, so I have had some struggles getting this guy in and out of pocket. If I go to show you, like I'm really pulling on this to get that to move, okay? So it's very, very stiff, and that does mean you're gonna have to, in certain pants it works fine, but I have had a few pairs of pants where I kind of have to help that clip to get in and out of my pocket. In terms of, grip, works really well in a saber grip, hammer grip, even reverse grip. Okay, all of these are very comfortable, and it really does, this is a knife that I've got to give extra points for ergonomics because it's really, really well done. So Liong Mah did a great job on getting this knife to fit the hand very, very well. All right, so let's go ahead and get to some comparisons. Let's see here. I've tried to get some stainless steel knives here. Let's see, what do we got? Probably the closest one that I have around right now would be the Reich. This is the new P135 SF. This review, by the way, should be coming up shortly. I'm not sure if it'll post before this one or not, but either way, if you're waiting, you want to see, a bit of a discussion about this to see how they stack up. Should be within a few days of each other, these two reviews come out. But again, this is a really well done stainless steel frame lock. This is noticeably lighter, and that is something to consider. It's also thinner. So in terms of carry, this guy carries much, much nicer. 14C28N steel is maybe a slight step down from D2, but they're almost too close to notice. So these are very comparable knives, except for on price point. This guy is gonna run you, I think, around $50 US. What else have we got? Here is a Rat Model 1, primarily for size comparison, okay. Para 2, let's grab that guy and put him in here. Here's a pair of two, again, primarily for size comparison. Real Steel G3 Puko. This is much smaller, but this is again a very well done, fairly expensive stainless steel frame lock. And you know, these stainless steel frame locks coming in at the higher price points is sort of a thing right now if they're really well done. And I've got to say both of these are really well done. What do we got? Let's throw in one titanium frame lock, just because now honestly I feel like this knife could have worked well as with higher end materials, with titanium and S30V or S35 or something like that, sort of like this guy. All right, and hopefully not at that price point, but I just thought I'd throw that in. And let's throw in just a budget flipper to show you that if you want a well done flipper, you don't have to spend, you know, a lot of money. You don't have to spend close to $100. This guy runs, I don't know, I think like 50 bucks or under, maybe 40. And it's really, really well done from Reich. Again, which one is this? This is the P138B. So those are some comparisons for you, and all of those I think would be pretty good competitors to this. Obviously there are a few things happening here, like the detent ramp, which is a great touch, extra little detail on some of the machining here, which all of that does add a little bit of extra value, and the design here is pretty cool. Now, here's what I'm going to say about this. Overall, this is a very capable knife. There's nothing specifically wrong with it. The clip could be a little more well done, but otherwise, you know, there's nothing that's just you know, there's nothing that makes me say, hey, this is a terrible knife, you shouldn't buy it or anything like that. It's a little heavy, and I know that's going to dissuade some people, but, you know, with that extra weight, you're going to get extra toughness. Stainless steel, there is some measurable benefit to the toughness and durability of stainless steel over, say, titanium. All right, now, let's go ahead and give you my overall thought here. Good knife, cool design, too expensive. Okay, that's where it is. This is a great $70 knife. This is an amazing $50 knife. It's an okay $70 or $80 knife, but it is not a $100 or $150 knife. It just isn't. Okay, and so for that price, I've got to say, skip it. When reality sets in, and I hope it will, and they start saying, hey, you know, we've got to let these go for the price that people are willing to pay. And, you know, for 75 or 80 bucks, I would say, yeah, this is not a bad knife if you really like the design. Okay, so that's my overall assessment of this knife. Good knife, just, you know, they kind of messed up on the price point. Now, maybe there's something going on there. Okay, maybe 150 is more like the MSRP, and Battlebox is trying not to burn bridges with retailers, you know, so maybe you're going to see these at Blade HQ or Knife Center or wherever else for 80 bucks. And, you know, Battlebox is doing the typical MSRP thing that every manufacturer does. We'll see if that is what is happening here or not. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.